So, music theory for pretty much any song you ever heard is probably much simpler than it seems. If you've heard any song written in the last 100 years that was on the FM radio or on any sort of charts, pop, rock, or folk in any country, it probably was actually written using just a few Western music theory frameworks, and that's it. As long as you can count, you can understand how it works. So the first order of business, the first framework we need is, what even are the notes? What notes are we going to use to write our song? We all have to agree, especially if we're in a band and we all have to have different instruments. We all make sure everyone is at least using the same notes. So that way when you say play that note, they play the thing you're expecting. So the first framework is called equal temperament tuning. What that means is we have 12 distinct notes, and you've probably heard of sharps and flats. Those are the same, okay? In equal temperament, you have 12 notes. Sharps and flats are the same. I'm using a piano here because a piano encodes a lot of this music theory in it really conveniently, but this applies to guitars, voice, whatever. So let me show you the 12 notes. We have C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B. Remember, sharps and flats are the same, so some of you might say this is B flat, and A sharp are the same thing in equal temperament tuning. And each one of these notes are distinct. They each have their own frequency, because sound is really just a wave. It's air that moves around, hits our eardrum, and our eardrum vibrates, and our brain perceives that as pitch. The more vibrations per second, also known as hertz, the more hertz, the higher our brain perceives the pitch to be. All right, so we have our 12 notes, right? You might be wondering, how come that's not like the 13th note? Well, actually, the notes start repeating here. So if this is C, this is also C. It's just twice the frequency. Whenever we double the frequency or have the frequency, we consider it the same note. So here's E, here's the next E. This E is twice the frequency of this E. The reason is because whenever we double the frequency, our brain kind of hears that as the same note. Even though one is higher, it resonates. So we consider that the same note here. So there's a certain quality to it. Try it for yourself. But we only have these 12 distinct notes. If we go higher, we've just doubled the frequency. We go lower, we just have the frequency. So that's our first framework. There's an issue with that framework, though, is that some combinations of those 12 notes don't always sound too good. Like, listen to this. Or this one. Does not sound as good as this. See, this one sounds somehow more complete to us for some reason. So it'd be nice if we had another framework that kind of sorted some of that out for us, gave us some guidelines for what sounds good together. So the way we solve that problem is the next Western music theory framework called scales. Scales are taking those 12 notes and saying, as long as there's this pattern of distances between the notes, those notes will have some cohesion to them, right? So you only need to know two things. These two intervals. Intervals are just distances between notes. The first interval you need to know is called a semitone or half step, the same thing. That's when you go from one note to the next. So the distance from C to C sharp is one semitone, also known as one half step. From E to F, one semitone, also known as one half step. The next interval you need to know is the whole step, which is just two semitones. So if you go 1, 2, that's a whole step. So C to D is a whole step. Now let's look at E. 1, 2. So E to F sharp is also one whole step, right? So we care about those intervals. When we define a scale, it's really about distances between notes. So the most popular scale is called the major scale, and this is its pattern. Whole step, half step. Whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, right? We can replay that pattern anywhere we want. On the piano, a piano really conveniently has, if you start on C and do that pattern, you only hit white keys. But you can start that pattern anywhere, and it's the same pattern. That's really what we care about, is the distances between notes. So look, if we start on E, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. the exact same pattern, right? We just did it starting at a higher place, but it's the same pattern. Our brain will recognize that pattern. So using the major scale, we go from 12 notes down to just 7, right? Now there's another little like mini framework within scales called modes. If you take that pattern of whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, take the leftmost interval, which was a whole step, and wrap it around to the right. So now the pattern will be whole, half, whole, whole, whole. What did I say? Half, whole. There we go. I did the mental counting in my head. See, it's not that hard. So when we shift the left note over and wrap it around, rotate it around to the end, we increment something called the mode. So the first mode is what you saw. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. The second mode is when we shifted that one to the left. And so that's the second mode of the major scale. If we do that 6 times, we end up on the 6th mode. I guess 5 times actually. We'd end up on the 6th mode, which is also known as the minor scale. So really, whenever you hear a song being written in minor or whatever, it's really actually the 6th mode of the major scale. It's still that same whole, whole, half pattern. We just shifted each of the notes over, so it ends up being like a different position in that pattern, but still the same pattern because that pattern just rotates. And see, because we have 7 distinct notes, once you've rotated 6 times, you just end up back where you started, right? So we have equal temperament. We have 12 notes. We whittled down those 12 notes to just 7 by using scales. We can modify that scale a bit by rotating the pattern, but still have the same pattern, just rotate. That's a mode. Now, the next one, this is where you are probably going to start recognizing a lot of terminology where this one matters a lot. What happens if you're playing in a band and you say, oh, I'm playing in the major scale? And so maybe you're the singer and the first notes you sing are like this note and then this note, right? You want the other instruments to be playing notes that sound good with those notes. Some of them might even be playing the same notes like that will like resonate with what you're singing, right? So you want to make sure you're all on the same page. But if you just say the major scale, that's not enough information because the guitar player might be playing the major scale starting here, like I did that demo about whole, whole, half, right? And you're over here doing whole, whole, half. That's your scale, but his scale was starting higher. You want to make sure you're all on the same page, so you need a reference point that everyone agrees on. You need like a root note. That is what a key is. A key is just a scale. It's a scale. Major scale, mode 1. What note are you starting on? What's our common reference point? So C major means you're playing the major scale, mode 1, starting at the C note. So if you're a piano player, you're like, great, I'm probably only going to hit white keys then, right? So that's all that a key is. It's as simple as that. When someone says D major, they're just doing the major scale, the first mode of the major scale, starting at D though. So whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. That's it. Like, it's just as simple as counting, right? That's all you're doing. And now another little mini framework inside of keys are chords. And most chords, when we talk about them, are what we would call triads, which are 3 notes at the same time. This is solving the problem of harmony. What happens when you have multiple sounds at the same time? Which ones sound good? So we went from 12 notes, some of them don't always sound good together, to 7 notes where a lot of them sound a lot better together. Now, to the nth degree here, we're going to say which notes, when played at the same time, sound especially good or have a certain nice cohesion to them. The way you find a chord is pick a starting note, right? So within your key, let's say we're in the key of C major, so just these white keys, pick a starting note. So I'll just pick C, right? Now, count the notes within that key. Find the 3rd note from your starting point. So here's my 1st, 2nd, 3rd. Okay, so I have 2 notes. Now find the 5th note from your starting point. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. So now we have these 3 notes. That's a chord. Now there's all sorts of ways in which you name chords. I'm not going to get into that for this video, but just know that if you have your key, pick a note to start on, and then count up 3 notes within your key, and then count up 5 notes, and that will be a chord. It's literally as simple as that. If you can count, you can do all this basic music theory frameworks that basically almost every song you've ever seen on the charts uses. So please comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks a lot.